Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host Paul Rook, and as always we are joined by the stupendous Kerry Greenaway, and tonight Richard's not joining us tonight.
No, unfortunately not. This whole situation is causing a bit of a problem for our Richard in regards to his mental health. He's not embarrassed to admit that. It's a common problem at the moment for a lot of people. So we would just like to say out there, don't forget you are not alone. Reach out, talk to people, get the help you need if you need it. This whole COVID lockdown situation is incredibly traumatic and impactful on people's mental well-being. So please reach out and talk to the people that you need to talk to. And we wish Richard all the best. And obviously, Paul and I are supporting him in the background as well. So, yeah, Richard, hurry up back. We're missing you already.
Yeah. It just seems different, not sort of introducing him to the show.
I know, it does feel like we've missed part of our third wheel, as it were. It's very weird, but we'll persevere.
Third wheel's fallen off. We'll have to go and pick that up later.
Particularly as tonight's show is going to be one of the subjects that he really does, or really wanted to be involved in. It's such a shame because we're continuing really off the back of the Barry Strom show, because on that show, as you all know, we channeled certain famous people throughout history, and at the end, the final message was given by, allegedly, Jesus to us. So that led us down a rabbit hole of thinking about actually religion and the paranormal together. That's sort of where we went with that, because we've covered this in other shows when we've talked about stigmata and holy relics and things like that. And there is a tie. So we was looking around, and it's actually quite a big topic, looking at the Bible and the paranormal, and we felt very out of our depths.
Yeah, and it gave us a bit of a headache, didn't it?
A little bit of one, because trying to understand some of Scripture when you're not knowing Scripture, quite frankly, is just like a bit of a mind blow kind of thing. But we came across a website. Now, the website is Ghosts, Ghouls and Gods, and the guy that writes on this is just phenomenal. Go check the website out. We'll share the link to the Paranormal Concept Facebook page for you guys to go and check it out. Now, this gentleman, he's got a distinction grade of Master of Arts, and he was a prize-winning dissertation on this one. This isn't just like a little thing. This is quite a big deal, right? This is, and the name of it was the Paranormal Hauntings and Application in Deliverance Ministry. This is, honestly, we've got an academic for you guys. That's what we've got. We want to welcome Matt Arnold to the show. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. I hope I live up to the bigging up on that one.
Well, just looking at your website, you certainly are going to. Because what you do, you know the Scriptures inside out, really, don't you?
I wouldn't say inside out. I'm still learning. It's a lifelong journey through it. It's a big book.
It is a big book. Now, before we get any, I always believed, and I know I'm wrong, I've learnt since, but I always believed that the Bible was basically written by a collaboration of different leaders under the Roman Emperor Constantine. But that's not true, is it?
No. I mean, it's been written over about 1,600 years by about 40 different authors, spanning quite a few different countries, majorly around the ancient Near East. So you're talking quite an extensive authorship.
You certainly are. And so where did that myth, it's a myth, isn't it, that this happened? It's almost like you're going, everyone seems to believe that he got all like different leaders from different denominations together and wrote it down. But it wasn't. It was just basically deciding which scriptures would enter the Bible. But that had actually nothing really to do with him. It was just, it happened while he was emperor.
Yeah, I mean, you've got various what's called synods, where people came together and looked at the various scriptures, the various books, and went, yeah, we can think that one's written by the original author, or that one's got provenance around that particular time. And they went through a fairly rigorous sifting process of whether or not a book would be classed as canonical. And whether it would be classed as pseudepigraphal, which is books that are purportedly written by an author, but we're pretty sure that they weren't written by an author. But the odd thing is that some of the books that we think are written by various people that managed to get in canon, we now think probably weren't written by them anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole mixed bag, really. As we work our way through archaeological research and stuff, we're realising more and more that what we thought we know, we don't know. So we're having to reassess stuff. But I'm saying that the Canon of Scripture, there are 7 canons of Scripture for the whole universal church. So you've got books that are in, say, the Roman Catholic canon that aren't in the Western Protestant canon. You've got books in the Ethiopian and the Eritrean canons that aren't in either of the Catholic or the Protestant. So you just have to look through it and test everything, sift it and say, well, I think I can go down on this one and say, yeah, I'm happy with that being in there. But the more that we're discovering in archaeology, the more we're realising that what we nailed down was pretty much like nailing jelly to a wall. Books were used in the times of Jesus that certain Protestants wouldn't use now. For instance, 1 Enoch and the apocryphal books.
Okay. Now, a lot of the stories initiated were verbal, weren't they? They were verbalized to each other before they even got written down into some form of scripture. So again, you've got that evolution of tale from verbal tellings before they got written down. So it becomes, and I've used this analogy quite recently, a chimera of different perspectives and belief systems and opinions based on something that possibly could have happened way back in then, but it doesn't change the tales and the story and the meaning behind it. But it's for us to, now in our modern times, to interpret that.
I mean, we've got to realise that the Bible wasn't written to us, modern 21st century people. It was written to people, as I said, thousands of years ago, in their cultures, using imagery that was in their culture, with their cultural mindset and all of the baggage that went with that. So, it cannot be written to a 21st century person to explain the origins of the universe, talking about quantum mechanics and things like that when, okay, they were pretty intelligent people building pyramids and that, but quantum mechanics, trying to explain it back then, just is a no-goer. So the revelation that came through these people, through the writers, would have been through their own personalities, through their own ideas about how things came to be. But that doesn't necessarily, as you say, mean that it doesn't have any application for us today. It was written for humankind, whatever age that we're living in, and we can still find the bits in there that are incredibly useful for life today.
And
so it is down to interpretation, then, isn't it? And
yes, I mean you've got to try and get the best way that you can interpret Scripture is by finding out what did the original author mean, and that comes with finding the archaeological evidence of surrounding cultures and the culture itself, so that we can find out what the words meant to those first listeners and writers.
It's within itself, it really is, regardless of belief system, or, obviously the whole thing is a belief system driven piece of work, but within that, there are incredible tales of phenomena that nowadays would come under the paranormal banner. Mm-hmm. Miracles, yes, miracles that happened. One of the main things God is supposed to have said was, don't talk to spirit, basically. Don't interact there. You shouldn't be doing that. And yet now and
I disagree.
Oh, right, okay.
But there we go, carry on.
Explain that point to me, because that's, again, maybe a myth that we've all taken from it.
Yes, it is a myth. Right, where do we start?
I'm going to sit back and let you go now.
Okay. there's no command not to actually engage. There's the command not to initiate contact. Okay, but there is the command to test the spirits, because not all come from God. So therefore, in order to test them, you have to listen to what they've got to say, and that requires communication. So therefore, what I would say is, don't go trying to stir stuff up. But if stuff is already disturbed, then listen and engage, but test what comes through.
But then in this day and age, that's quite a worrying thing, because there's a lot of people out there going out and deliberately initiating or trying to initiate contact, isn't there?
Yep.
So
yep.
Carry on.
I'd basically say, just be very careful what you're doing, because firstly, if you are engaging with spirits of the dead, they're not there for entertainment purposes, just as a normal enfleshed person would be. Mm-hmm. They're not there for your entertainment. They don't dance, they don't whistle when you say whistle to me or things like that. And some of these people might be hurting still. So therefore, for us to go and start stirring stuff up is dishonouring to them, I think would be the best way of saying it.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people that do investigations, and they do tend to, a lot of people that I know do it respectfully. They ask the spirit to come to them. But as you said, it's initiating that communication, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got the dead who are resting in peace, but you've also got the unquiet dead who are disturbed for some reason, and that is what I see as a purpose that we can have in trying to lay to rest those spirits that are unquiet.
Yeah, that's almost like a human responsibility, isn't it, to prevent hurt to each other. That's what we should be living by. We don't. Generally, we see unfortunate consequences of actions all over the place. But our goal should be to try and not hurt people and work in kindness towards people. Unfortunately, that's a lesson that very few, they look internal rather than external influence. And anyway, that's a whole different theological discussion, isn't it? So let's get back to this. So in regard to ghosts of people, why would they want to hang around if God or the higher realms are there ready to receive?
I don't know. I'll tell you when I get on the other side and you join me. I don't know. There are occasional instances where there have been people like C.S. Lewis, the writer of the Narnia Chronicles and many, many other theological tomes, who actually came twice and appeared to J.B. Phillips, who was working on a Bible translation. And J.B. Phillips, in his foreword, gives thanks to C.S. Lewis for his encouragement, which seems to be a little bit coded messages to, I actually had a posthumous couple of appearances of C.S. Lewis to me. So there's encouragement. But then you've got other stuff as well, restless souls and all that sort of stuff, jobs to do. I mean, there's this whole concept of going to heaven when you die, or downstairs, as it were, which really is just a modern thing. Back in the old days, the early church, it was actually classed as a heresy that you went to heaven when you died. It was a Gnostic, from the old ancient Gnostic teachings, that you went to heaven when you died. There was the whole belief system of the afterlife, Sheol or Hades, where everybody went, good, bad, indifferent. And so therefore you had a life that was not sitting around and sleeping, which is an invention that Luther promoted back in the days of the Reformation, when he got rid of purgatory and had to then give account for why there were things like poltergeists and restless spirits and things. So he just basically said, oh, well, they're all demons because they can't be human spirits because purgatory doesn't exist, does it? I mean, I don't believe in purgatory myself, but I believe that there is an afterlife realm that people are in where they continue to work out their salvation, as the Bible says.
And that belief system of heaven, hell and purgatory comes from very early days of Dante, though, doesn't it? That's where our modern day perception still kind of sits, really. And we have that...
A lot of... Sorry, go on.
No, you carry on.
A lot of perceptions that we have of hell and heaven do indeed come from Dante or Milton. And people have taken those as almost the 67th book of the Bible. And what people come out with and talk about when they talk about heaven and hell is actually Milton-esque or Dante-esque.
And we need to sort of like get rid of that theology within our brains ourselves, really, that there is no separation between any of that, really. It's an evolution of soul rather than a judgment of soul. That hasn't happened yet, right?
Well, kind of yes and no. I mean, the Milton and Dante-esque stuff is definitely an evolution of the afterlife belief systems. But these go back to 300 BC before then, where in the ancient Hebraic writings, you would have an idea of Sheol where everybody went, and it was a sort of a grey, shady place where the shades lived. And life there was not a patch on the colour of life in the flesh. And then as you get towards the time of the Maccabees and the Maccabean revolt, you get these Jews going, hold on a second, this isn't right. We've got our brave Jewish warriors who are dying in battle, going to the same places as these heathen Gentiles. What's going on? We've got to have some sort of separation here. And there's then that development of a segregation within Sheol, where when you get to sort of the writings of 1 Enoch, you have 4 compartments within the afterlife, including paradise. And you've got places like Tartarus, where the rebellious angels that fell back in Genesis 6 and 1 Enoch 1-36 are held. There talks about in Jude and 2 Peter. But then you've also got another development where when you get to Jesus' time, and he talks about the rich man Lazarus, he talks about at least 2 compartments. And so there are some there that talk about Hades, where the rich man is, and Lazarus is in by Abraham's bosom, which is paradise. And then you've got the thief on the cross who repents, and you've got Jesus telling him, today you'll be with me in paradise. So you've got these different compartments within the afterlife, which would make sense if everybody goes to Hades or Sheol, which is the Hebrew version of it. But then you get to, say, the King James, the Wycliffe translation of the Bible, where hell was used as a catch-all word for Gehenna, which is a fiery place, Tartarus, which is the prison place, and then Hades. So Hades, Gehenna, and Tartarus were all wrapped up in this word called hell, which was given the impression by Milton and Dante. So, yeah, it's all a bit of a mess, really, how it's developed.
But again, it's human personifications, isn't it, of theories or theologies, should I say. And that's something we should be aware of, really, because no matter what our own personal belief system is, we have to be aware that these writings and stuff have actually been done by humans at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the whole concept of inspired writing, where the writing has been inspired by the creator himself or herself, or genderless. Gender. I don't use the word genderless, I use the word genderful for the divine creator. Mm-hmm. So you've got that inspiration there that you would be expected to get. So people are being given glimpses of what it's like in the afterlife through this. And then when we get to today's world, we've got a ton of equipment to bring people back from pretty much what would be considered the dead, with near-death experience stuff, actual death experience stuff, out-of-body experience, all of that stuff, some of which is actually in the Bible, but we just kind of don't really call it that because those terms weren't invented 2,000 years ago.
Very,
So
very true, Paul.
So it is essentially, basically, that obviously you've got bits that are you have evidence for, so like Jesus existing, even if he just had to be managed to be like I don't know, some sort of mage or something. But when it comes to heaven and hell, and it's almost like they've just sort of made it up. It's like.
I wouldn't say they make it up anyway in any way that
No, but like
an MDE would say they made it up.
No, I would say it's almost like based on personal experience. They've experienced something in the same way as we have a personal experience in regards to, I don't know, a near-death experience or out-of-body experience or even a spirit.
No, I'm talking in the respect of that, like for example, with the Jews, when they were like, with our warriors, we need an extra like level, as it were. So
yes, I see what you mean there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It's like some of it is sort of made up.
I wouldn't necessarily made up. I would say understood better. Things that happen like that, where there's a lot of death, it causes people to reevaluate what do I believe, and to really sit down and think, how does this actually make sense in the world that I'm living in? So therefore, I wouldn't say necessarily made it up so much as worked it out.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the best known person in the Bible, the one that we always refer to and talk to, and who we allegedly spoke to last week, not last week, the week before, Jesus. Let's talk Jesus. Now, do we have proof, actual physical proof, as it were, that he existed as a person?
We've got writings by people like Josephus who talks about Jesus being more than just a human being, if it was not blasphemous to say so. I think I've just read an article on some writing that has been discovered about Jesus, son of Mary. So the fact that you've got 20,000 documented pieces of evidence that mention Jesus, spanning across this whole thing, I would say is pretty conclusive that he existed in the same way as we believe that Julius Caesar existed, even though there's actually less evidence that Caesar did exist. You've got people who are writing stuff down about the life of Jesus within 15, 20 years of his death. So, you have got first-hand eyewitness account material, and from a historical perspective, you'd be strained to find an academic historian who would definitely say that Jesus didn't exist. Okay.
The person that was Jesus was incredibly influential, beyond his time, quite frankly.
Hence we're talking today about him.
Exactly. He's never gone away, has he? He's like the most famous person in the world still to this day, after, thousands and thousands of years since he was on this earth, giving his influence. Came from very, very humble beginnings. But even in pre-beginning, his conception was a miracle. It's something that nowadays you could look at that and go, yeah, Mary played away, naughty Mary. But it's a miracle in itself, isn't it? The Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that say, well, okay, maybe it was parthenogenesis, where maybe somehow Mary's cell got impregnated by Mary's cell or something, some of Mary's DNA managed to get inside the egg. Whatever the mechanics of parthenogenesis are. Problem is with parthenogenesis, it actually produces a clone. So Jesus would have been female. Doesn't work. So that theory is dead in the water, really. As to Mary playing away, why? Teenagers do that sort of stuff. But to be honest, to be able to carry that story so well, when everybody else knows, that didn't really happen. When somebody in our village would say, oh yeah, I became pregnant and it was a virgin conception, we're like, I don't think so. And so therefore, back then, they would have been still thinking the same sort of stuff. But they would have had people who would have been able to test this sort of thing, as they used to do in medieval times. And, so tests do exist for virginity. So, it's a bit graphic to go into the details, but you and I know what that means.
Well, this is
so
true.
It could have been easily disproven. And that then would have been dead in the water right back at the very beginning.
And Joseph probably would have gone, no, I'm not going to marry her. I'm not going to marry her.
Well, he had it in his mind that he thought at one point that she'd been playing away. And he had in mind secretly to divorce her. Because at that point in time, the way that marriage worked was you're pretty much married in all but the consummation side of things. So, for him to go that far, it would have required a miracle for him not to have done it. And he had an angel appear to him and basically tell him, this is what's going on, don't worry, all will be well, pretty much.
And that in itself is another paranormal phenomena. We've got two right there. An angel appears to Joseph and tells him it's all going to be well. And that could lead us down a whole different rabbit hole. But let's just stay on the Jesus theme for now, because throughout his life, his words spread like wildfire. He had followers, everywhere he went. He was surrounded by people wanting to heal him, him to heal them, many, many stories surrounding Jesus of paranormal phenomena, even when you look at the passion of his death and the lengths, the mental strength of him comes through. When I read that, I don't see a son of God or the God's perspective of that. I see a man under immense pressure, psychological and physical distress, but mentally he's so strong in his belief and his mental capacity. Now, that in itself is a lesson, isn't it? To hold your own, to be true to yourself, to be self-authentic, and against all external obstruction, I would say. That in itself is a paranormal feat of extraordinary measures.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things within Christianity is what's called the Christ-centered self-definition, whereby you know who you are. So, I am a child of God. I'm made as an imager of God. I am God's ambassador on earth. But I'm also who. So I know who I am, but I also know whose I am. I am God's.
The whole story of Jesus itself, although it's actually quite a small part, isn't it, of the Bible? Relatively.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you view it. If you just sort of like read the incarnate bits of Jesus, then yeah. If you realise that the angel of the Lord is the second person of the Godhead, i.e. Jesus, the second Yahweh, as it were, throughout the Old Testament, you'll see him popping up all over the place. And also he pops up to Paul on the road to Damascus, and also to John of Patmos when he's doing his final book called Revelation.
So even post-death, as it were, although he came back and was like, no, don't worry, although my physical body's gone, I'm still around, everybody. He keeps coming back. He comes back. Does he come back? Have we got any modern day examples of where Jesus has stepped in that we know of? I mean, I know we spoke to him just 2 weeks ago, but, that was through somebody.
Well, I mean, first off, I would take issue, as it were, when you say he died and he sort of like left his body, as it were. He did come back physically at the resurrection.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the book of Luke and chapter 24 is written as a ghost story. But it's a ghost story par excellence. It basically takes all of the different categories of ghost and combines them in an analysis of actually this is Jesus. And Luke, the writer, sets up, hey, this could be Jesus, what Jesus is. Hey, he could be a revenant. But hold on, revenants don't do this. He could be a spirit, but a spirit doesn't have a body, so he couldn't do this. And Luke is setting up these different arguments of, well, he could be this, he could be this, he could be this, and blows them away one at a time by saying, no, this is somebody who has been resurrected in a new body that somehow is trans-dimensional, that can go through walls, where he is more solid than solid, as C.S. Lewis put. In terms of his later appearances, I mean, I only know one myself of a lady who was praying in the church that I used to go to, and we had a cross. We didn't have a crucifix, we had a cross up on the wall, and she believed that she saw Jesus come down from that cross and kiss her on the forehead, and then went away. Now, that powerfully impacted her. So, you know, we've also got things where missionaries have gone to tribes, and the tribes will say, oh, yeah, this Jesus guy, yeah, he talked to us out of the fire. Yeah, he said exactly what you're saying. So that kind of fits in with my whole theological view of something called the Missio Dei, which is the mission of God. People have this idea that the church does mission, and God joins in with it. And, you know, hey, we're going to do this mission to this place, and we're going to ask God to join us. I'm thinking, no, actually, God's already there. Because if you've got an omnipresent God, there can be nowhere that God isn't. And if God is pro-human, as he definitely is, then God will be speaking to people in their language, in their culture, in their way, that they can understand exactly who he is. So that when people come along afterwards and say, hey, have you heard about this guy called Jesus? They go, yeah, of course we have. I would call it the fingerprints of the divine are spread throughout time and space.
Other than the Bible, is there any other physical evidence that Jesus existed? Because, I mean, I know at one point they thought the Turin Shroud was obviously the image of Jesus.
Well, he laughs at that. He's like,
yeah. Because Jesus dressed up like a medieval soldier, didn't he?
Yeah, or even like the cave that he was supposed to be buried, like his tomb.
The tomb, yeah.
Yeah, you know, has that been discovered? And it's a Jesus, or?
Well, you're not going to find any relics of Jesus. Let's put it like that. Because if he's raised from the dead,
or something.
you're not going to find any relics like that. No, but that's actually interesting in itself, because every other religious leader you can find relics of, but you can't find ones of Jesus. Strange, eh? But anyway, I mean, as I say, you've got how many bits of the cross have you got that could make hundreds of crosses?
To be fair, when we did the show on the holy relics, we made that exactly that point. We said if you actually got all the bits of the cross together, you could probably make a whole ship. You know, not just a cross. You could probably make an entire galleon ship out of it. And you know, even down to we came across, and Paul's going to totally cringe when I bring this one up. We were talking about, we found an account of the Honey Circumcision.
Okay.
I know, right? Very weird, right. Really weird stories surrounding that one. But that went missing. It was kept in a box beneath a father's bed. He didn't know what to do with it, and it went missing. So the conspiracy is the Vatican actually went and stole it. But in the scriptures, it says that when Jesus rose, he rose whole. Which means that bit would have gone back to Jesus. So it's
I have never thought this one through.
I really hope that they didn't just drop it into a bag of hula hoops or something.
Or onion rings or something. No. Definitely one to chew over with a pint when we can get back in the pub.
Most definitely. Well, one particular lady was supposed to have had it appear on her tongue about 100 times before she realised what it was. So, again...
Okay, my question would be, why?
I know, that's what we said at the time. What was he thinking, if that was the case? Well...
I mean, I do weird. That's what I do. But there's weird, and there's just...
bonkers.
I haven't even... Well, no, it's beyond bonkers. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's a very good point about being raised whole, because Jesus came down embodied as a Jew and went through all the Jewish ritual processes. but raised, Jesus is for everyone. And so therefore, I would say, well, yeah, you've probably got a point there, that he would have that intact.
I did also ask the question at the time when we was looking at that, was like, who checked?
Well, it might be doubting Thomas. Who knows?
Who knows, eh? But that was a little one we came across when we was looking at... Anyway, let's go back to the relics, and the whole point of that was relics. We went off on a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, that's all right. So in terms of evidence, then... Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
I think you'd be insulted to say it's a little one.
Well, Matt said it was the size of an onion ring, so that's like the opposite end of the spectrum.
I didn't say that. I just... No, I'm not going down that road. No.
Anyway, go back to the serious point in question here of what Paul asked.
So things, as I said, we've got writings of Josephus. We're finding writings, there's written documents, the Qumran documents, thousands and thousands of bits of writing that include evidence of Jesus being part of, contained within those writings. So you've got written accounts of him, not just the New Testament accounts, but you've got the Qumran documents, which contain New Testament writings as well, contain Second Temple writings. And then, really, you kind of, you start to stray into things like Dan Brown territory, and I don't even want to go there, because that is weird as well.
That is pure conspiracy. He's brought a lot of points together to make a lovely fictional story, which a lot of people bought into, but raises a lot of interesting concepts. If you take various threads from those books, you can go down so many rabbit holes and find out that they're not actually interconnected in the way that he's connected them, and that certain things are mythological that he's included in there. So that is a whole different ballgame, and leads us down into the world of conspiracy theory, which is not what we're focused on today at all. Let's talk angels. Let's go into that. Within the Bible, there are the angels and hashtag demons. I hate to use that word. I really don't like to use that word, but
it's okay. I could do both.
I know you can, but in our world of like paranormal investigation world, that word has really been used in incredibly out of context, hasn't it?
Yes, it's been abused, I would say. You've got to realise that the word angel was invented by the Septuagint translators. That's the translators of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, which was done around about sort of like 300 BC-ish. They had the original term within the Greek culture was called a daimon. Mm-hmm. And a daimon was an intermediate being between God at the top level and human beings at the bottom level. And daimons were messengers they were ranged from anywhere from gods through to sort of DHL, Amazon delivery driver type level activity, bringing messages between the gods and human beings. The problem was that because when they were writing these the Greek translation for a Jewish audience at the time, they wanted to get away from the idea of daimon being just such a mixed bag of particular characters. And so they wanted to say, well, we're going to make not a category and not an ontological category of beings, but we're going to make a description, a job description of a being that carries a message from the Eternal One to human beings. And that from the Eternal One to the human beings, we're going to call an angel, an angelos. We're going to distinguish that from a daimon, which could be a human spirit, or it could be a god with a small g, as in not one of the god, not the eternal God, but one of the created gods, or it could be an intermediate being that is not one of the gods or not a human spirit. And so that kind of came about in order to clarify when they say a daimon, when the reader read daimon, it was to clarify to them, actually, no, we're going to put the word angel in here so that you know that this is a spirit being from God to us. So that's kind of what they did. So they created this classification, as it were, of being, which is kind of like how when we read of the daimons within the Bible, they've got all sorts of different names within the Old Testament, and then you get into daimons in the New Testament. And then you also got into the angels, which kind of, I mean, we'd think of angels today as being these white beings with great big wings, and you don't mess with them. Mm-hmm. And some of them, I would say that is pretty much the case. But I kind of say, well, what do you mean by angel? Because angel just means messenger. There are different spirit beings that are still within the divine counsel of God, shall we say, from watchers through to Ophanim, which are the throne bearers. They're the ones with the wheels within the wheels and the eyes all around them. Pretty scary characters from Ezekiel. And then you get to the seraphim and the cherubim. Now, this is another thing about the context and how the context makes the difference. The seraphim is a serpentine creature that is fiery, and it's a throne guardian. And these images, the serpentine throne guardians, come from the times of the Hebrews when they were in Egypt. Because if you look in Egyptian culture, snakes appear quite a bit as throne guardians. And the seraph is, it means the character who appears in the Garden of Eden. We hear of the talking snake, as it were. Mm-hmm. It's actually the Nakash, which is a bright, shining serpentine one. That is imagery that comes from that Egyptian time when Genesis was being sort of compiled and just afterwards. Then you get to times of things like Isaiah and Ezekiel and that, where they are in Babylonian captivity, Babylonian Assyrian culture type stuff. And the throne guardians that appear in those books are ones that have 4 faces: an ox, a lion, an eagle, and a human. So they're chimeral characters. And those appear as the same sort of characters that are in the big guardian statues that we see on temples in the Mesopotamian region. Were they the same beings? I actually say yes, seraphim and cherubim are the same beings. But then as you go through time to sort of medieval times, you get this idea of cherubim being these fat babies with wings.
Yeah, you do.
It's like, where the heck did that come from? I'm sorry, but no. They were big beastie things that you just didn't mess with. But, you know, when angels appear in the Bible, they pretty much always start with "do not fear." That's because, you know, when one appeared to people, it was often sort of like, well, let's open a small sewage farm in my trousers. They were scary characters. You just didn't mess with them. So therefore, how we've developed, we've domesticated angels to the point now where, you know, we say, oh, I've got a guardian angel. And I know that because I can see a feather occasionally. And it's like, well, no, this stuff, it doesn't come from Judeo-Christian sort of understanding of it. Although some beings have wings, they're not angels. Because as I say, angel is just a job function. It's not an ontological category of being. And then you get to today where we've got demons like Zach Bagans in his Ghost Adventures and that, where everything's a demon. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be now that any negative being that we come across is a demon.
Yeah.
And my whole thesis is kind of like, well, we need to rewind the clock back to, well, what were daimons actually? Because then we can understand that daimons included human spirits. And so therefore you can then say, well, okay, what are we experiencing now in the paranormal? Are we experiencing just purely non-human evil spirits? Or are we experiencing humans who have been pretty nasty throughout their life and haven't changed since they've gone into the afterlife? I don't believe that you instantly change when you hit that terminus of being in the flesh. I think there's still a process that goes on towards becoming more fully what we were meant to be.
Well, there you go, guys. That's just us putting people in boxes again, or entities in boxes, basically, isn't it? We have to classify things and put them in boxes. And
we've always done it, though. We've always done it throughout history. So it's a human thing to categorize stuff so that we can understand it better.
Yeah, and that's just pure human nature, isn't it? You know, we have to have it in a box. If it doesn't fit in a box, we sort of go into a mini meltdown until we can classify it. Even make up new boxes.
Oh yes, and I'm saying let's try and see what was in the original wrapping.
So how much of that do you think comes down to archetypal types, which is a concept that Carl Jung explored within ourselves? We all have characters deep within our own psyche that come forward as characterizations. What do you think that this is part of that, or do you think this is a separate thing?
It's a difficult one. I think the way, as I said with the seraphim, the cherubim, I think the way that beings present themselves to us, they present themselves in ways that we can understand, and that we would say, yeah, that was definitely an angel, or that was definitely such and such. I mean, I have a story of an angel that appeared to us when we got off the plane at Cyprus. We got a taxi, not a taxi, we got a hire car, driven down the motorway. We're trying to find a particular village, and we got lost. I read a road sign wrong because the letter P in Greek, the letter R in Greek is a capital P. So I read a road sign wrong. We got completely lost. This is 2:00 in the morning. Pitch black, back roads, no idea what's going on. And my mum, my brother and I were in the car, and we just said, okay, God, we haven't got a clue where we're going. Please help us. And as soon as we said amen, headlights came over the brow of the hill. The car pulled up alongside us. Why a car would pull up alongside us, I don't know. Maybe it's just there's a car there with some people in. But in plain English, spoke without us saying anything, how can I help you? Now, timing-wise, was interesting. Maybe the registration of the car was such that they knew that it was a hire car. I don't know. That could be an explanation. And their guess would be, well, it's a hire car, so they're probably going to be English, or at least speaking a bit of English. They knew exactly where we were going, pointed us in the direction, and disappeared. And we all said, okay, that was an angel. Okay, and we would say, well, yeah, it does fit that category of messenger, that it's brought a message to say this is the safe way to go. It didn't appear as a great big ball of light or anything with wings or anything like that. So did it fit into our archetypes of what an angel would be? I don't think it did, but it fitted into our understanding of what it would be when we were able to reflect upon the experience.
No, I'm with you on that. I think they appear as you expect them to appear sometimes, and in the most unexpected ways. We hear that in stories of the Fae as well. When we looked into the Fae mythology, they don't appear as you like little Tinkerbells. Again, we've domesticated the Fae, haven't we? But in that respect,
Tolkien flipped his lid when he was talking about, the fairies. Fae are not the diminutive little folk of the Victorian times. And Tolkien was a Christian as well. He wrote a lot of his stuff based on a Christian theology. And the more you look into things like the way that his world, his supernatural world works, the more we start to say, actually, this kind of really does fit a biblical model of a spiritual middle ground, as it were.
C.S. Lewis was a bit like that as well.
Yeah,
well, C.S. Lewis was openly writing allegory of the Christian experience. Tolkien wasn't writing allegory as such, but he wrote more than allegory. But they both of them. I mean, Tolkien got really annoyed at Lewis because Lewis sort of like was listening to all this stuff in the pub, and he went and wrote it down in 7 books, which was much quicker than for Tolkien to write his Legendarium.
Just a little side note, what did you think of the films? Did you think it did it justice?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed them. We were living in Abingdon at the time, and we went up to the Eagle and Child and had a pint in there every time before we went and saw The Lord of the Rings. It was just tradition by the time we did it the third time, as everything normally does. But yeah, I really enjoyed those films, and I think there was so much that Walsh and Jackson brought to it as well that... sorry, I've just seen an orb flying through there. No, it's just dust, don't worry.
We know.
But yeah, Walsh and Jackson brought a lot to it as well. So I personally think that, behind the scenes, Tolkien might have been sort of having a few whispers in people's ears or inspiring people to do stuff.
No, I agree with that.
So, I'm comfortable with that. No problem at all.
I thought it was an inspired rendition of the books. I think it was just brilliant. I thought he translated that into film perfectly. I don't think anybody could ever do better on that. There's a series coming up, apparently. They're doing a series.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if it's as good as The Mandalorian, then yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But I mean, things like restitution and laying of the unquiet dead, as it were. You've got the dead men of Dunharrow, and when Aragorn goes and sort of like communicates with them and says, "Okay, you've got an opportunity now to find your peace." That kind of, to me, speaks quite a lot of, well, I am to bring peace in this world, but I'm also to bring peace in the afterlife, as it were, to those that have passed over. Whether it is by just doing the old, well, the technical term, psychopomping, just moving them on, as it were, presenting them, as it were, to God or to the angels that take them up, or those that are restless, being able to bring peace to them as well, through often through just something simple as just celebrating communion, which is it provides a reconciliatory act between humans and God.
See, even in modern day media, we can find religious and Christian and themes that run through, can't we?
God's fingerprints are everywhere.
Yeah, we're being subjected to it, even when you don't realise that you are in something as fictional as Lord of the Rings, or C.S. Lewis, or any of those. Those themes are running through. So in your deep psyche, these messages of these stories and these messages are going in. You are being subjected to it, even if you don't realise you are. And as Matt says, God's fingerprints are everywhere. Let's talk then about the division in those categories that we talked about in regard to angels. What happened there? Why was there arguments between them, which is why some of them got cast out?
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about the... why did human beings argue about the categories?
Oh, no. I'm up in the ethers again now.
Okay. So the original rebel, who we now call Satan, that was an anointed cherub, so an anointed throne guardian, that walked amongst the stones of fire, which we believe is a metaphor for other spiritual beings on the top of the holy mountain. The whole Bible is kind of like two mountains, really. It's Mount Zion and Mount Hermon. Mount Zion is Yahweh's mountain. Mount Hermon is where the angels that fell, the heavenly beings that fell, descended upon the earth. So in the beginning, you've got pride. Pride enters the heart of the original rebel who wants to be like his creator. He wants to take reign over his creator. Why that happened, I don't know. The origins of pride, the the origin of sin, I don't think we know where that comes from. But that is a product of, well, it's not a product, it's a risk of giving creatures free will. You can choose to love me, or you can choose not to love me. God didn't make robots just, I can program a computer to say 10 print, I love you, 20 go to 10, and it'll just go right up the screen, I love you. What does that mean? It means nothing. I've just programmed a computer to do it. For a being to actually reciprocate love of their own volition is the ultimate love that is shown. So therefore, to create beings that have that ability to love back means also that they have the ability not to. And so therefore, the original rebel chose not to. Then we've got the Edenic scene with human beings and the story of the temptation and the first fall of human beings. The first fall. Often in Western Christianity, we just stick with that as being what we call the fall. And the world's calamities are all because of that. However, if you read the Bible, then you'll find that there's a couple more falls. And if you go and ask an ancient Jew, what's the fall? They would actually say, well, there are 3 falls. There's the first fall, which is the Edenic one of humans. And then you've also got a fall within Genesis 6, where you've got the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. Now, you get to times of things like Augustine, who said, well, actually, this is a bit embarrassing. We can't explain how you can have sexual acts between angels and heavenly beings and women. And we can't explain how semen would be be able to transmit and that sort of stuff, all of the mechanics of it. All I would say to that is, well, hold on a second, you've got Jesus. Go figure, guys. You're happy to accept that Jesus was born of a virgin, but you're not happy to go with this sons of God actually being what they are throughout the rest of Scripture, are heavenly beings. So you get that you get this wish, I think it is, to be embodied. We want offspring of our own. We've got this seed of God, which is through Adam and Eve and the rest of humankind. We actually want some of our own seed. We want to be creators of beings ourselves, rather than just leave that up to the eternal creator. And so therefore, you've got this descent of the Watchers that were originally there to teach human beings about things like agriculture, about medicine, and all that sort of stuff. So they were originally good guys that turned bad, and they corrupted their ways by using all of the good things and completely twisting them in the opposite direction. So things like metallurgy, metalsmithing, right? All of that can be used for good stuff like agriculture, building plows. But they actually used it to produce swords. So they came down, taught us good things, but then perverted their ways to teach us bad things, how to use that stuff. Which is interesting how throughout, when you get to the end time prophecies, it talks about turning swords into plowshares. So it's the reversing of that corruption that happened with humankind back in the second fall, and you get this descent of the Watchers that produce this ungodly offspring. What Enoch calls the bastard sons of God, which is a great title of a paper if you look it up. And basically they were called the Metzmer, the bastards basically. And these were illegitimate children that were effectively what the Greeks called the Titans. And so therefore you've got these giants. They called them giants in the Greek. But I'm 6'6", and I'm pretty much a giant compared to some of my friends who are only 5'1", 5'2". So when you read about giants in the Bible, you have to kind of say, well, they were just pretty tall people, I would have thought. So you've got these people that are illegitimate, and they become, the story of one Enoch tells us that they became destructive to not just human life, but they became destructive to animal, plant, and the landscape. So these giants, in inverted commas, became destructive to life, full stop, to the planet and everything. And that's why you get the Noahic flood taking place, and that's why you get some of the animals going on there, because they didn't just corrupt human beings, they corrupted the animal life as well. And then you get to the Tower of Babel, which is the third fall, where God says, okay, I'm going to divide the nations up, and I'm going to put one of my sons, one of my children, in charge of each of these nations. And but Israel is going to be my lot, okay? So you're going to have a son of God over you. You're going to have a son of God over you, but Israelites, you're going to be my portion. And then these guys decided that they also would accept worship as well. So that's what you get with the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, we've got these sort of paintings of very high, tall buildings, or and it says, it reaches to the heavens. But actually, you can translate the original Hebrew as with the heavens, with the heavenlies or the heavens in its top. And if you look at the ziggurats of that area, they have temples at the top of them, the ones that are remaining. And so therefore you can say, well, these guys that were assigned nations to look after, to point towards the Creator, because God runs a bureaucracy of, he doesn't do everything. God allocates jobs to various beings and people. And these guys just rebelled, accepted worship on their own, and as a result, they were judged. So that's why you've got these different fallings of angels. The spirits, the evil spirits that we have in the Bible generally come from the bastard sons of God that were destroyed in the flood, because the watchers that were judged are imprisoned in Tartarus until the end. So therefore, they're kind of out of the equation, pretty much. They're not able to influence us. But you have still got evil spirits that are not human, that can influence us. And you can also have human spirits who have been evil in this life and continue to be evil in the next.
On that note, we've actually come to you're going to have to wait on that one, Paul, I'm afraid, because we've come to the end of the first half of the show. Listen to this, but please join us after the break, because this is a fascinating discussion. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK radio network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. Now, before the break, we were delving into the fall and the Satan and the millions that fell and all that sort of thing. And Paul had a question, and we had to break for the break. So, Paul, fire away, darling.
Okay. Basically, I was reading one of your blogs on your website, and it was talking about the Nephilim and that they were the Watchers. So I'm assuming that's who you was referring to when you called them the Watchers.
Yes, I mean, there's lots and lots of arguments backwards and forwards about who the Nephilim were. For 2,000 years plus, they've been arguing what they are. Nephal is the original Hebrew, which gives us the Nephilim, and it means fallen. So there's a clue in itself as to what that means. It's to do with the fallen ones. Some people have said that it's the hybrid offspring of the Watchers, but it doesn't really seem to fit with the text, because the text talks about the Nephilim, and it also talks about the Gibberim, which are different beings. And so therefore, when you look at the Gibberim, you look at, and the Septuagint writers, they translate those as the giants, or the Gigantes. the Titan-type characters that were the offspring of, that were the sons of God, basically. So I would say that the Nephilim were the sons of God that fell, and the Gibborim were the ones that were the hybrid offspring, the bastard sons of God.
Okay.
So there you go. Now, I'm going to change tracks a little on this. Of all the things I could bring up at this point, I am actually going to change tracks. Because I'm sure there's a question that most of our listeners are now probably thinking is, for somebody so well versed, I mean, you're coming out with like references to parts in the Bible and stuff like that, just off the top of your head. How did you get into the paranormal? I mean, I know you picked the book that is like the best paranormal book ever. If you haven't read the Bible, then I suggest you do. It starts with paranormal phenomenon right from the word go. So how did you get into the paranormal?
At primary school, everybody in the class had a little project that we had to learn how to do research. And I went into the school library, a little thing, 50 by 15 foot, and had a little poke through and saw this Usborne World of the Strange Ghosts. And I thought, ooh, that looks interesting. And it was full of brilliant pictures of ghost stories and how to do a paranormal investigation. And we've got to remember this is the 70s. And so you hadn't got your EVP, you hadn't got your SLS cameras, you hadn't got your spirit boxes or any of that. You just got a tape recorder and a notebook and a thermometer, and that was pretty much it. And I read this and I was fascinated by it. I mean, the one the picture that comes to mind is that double page spread of the haunted house with the little pictures that say this is what happens here and the clock strikes 13, somebody's going to die, and that was amazing. And so I got into it slightly that way. A strange story to do with that, and I went to another class later on, and we were given a same idea of go and produce a project. And I'm kind of a bit lazy in the sense that I recycled what I wanted to do. And also because I was still interested. So I went to try and get that book, but it had been ripped up. There were 2 books that had been ripped up overnight in that school library and torn to sort of like inch square shreds. And there was an announcement. We saw it as we went back through to school, through to our classes. And there was an announcement in the assembly, if anybody knows any information. Nobody found out who it was. About probably 35, 36 years later, get to Facebook and meet people who went to the same school, primary school as me. And I said, did I actually just invent this, or did this really happen? And 2 or 3 people went, yeah, this definitely did happen. We remember that. And I'm like, oh, how weird. So I kind of had been interested in ghosts then. I mean, I got through Scooby-Doo as well. I'm one of the haunted generation, as we call it, from the 70s. And so I grew up with all of that weird chisel. And it's never really gone from me. I became a Christian when I was 14. I'd been to church since a little kid. And I'm a thinker. I ask those questions that nobody wants to ask, or nobody really wants to try and answer properly. And when people were trying to fob me off with questions about the paranormal, and they're going, oh, well, it's just demons, I'm like, well, hold on, what about this C.S. Lewis guy who's turned up? He's appeared to J.B. Phillips, as I said previously, and do you think you could be having demons creating a translation of the Bible? I mean, but that's going to create people who are going to be followers of Jesus. It's kind of a massive own goal, isn't it? And so all these logical inconsistencies then started to say, well, maybe there's something to it that is real. My first, I would say, proper encounter that kind of set me well on this track was in 2011. When we went to what's called a home group, where our church kind of had separate meetings outside of a Sunday, and you got together with your friends and you did some Bible study. And I decided I was going to bring a DVD. We were going to watch a film and we were going to talk about it. I got my little media box. I'd brought that with me because I'm prepared just in case I haven't got the equipment. Mm-hmm. I wasn't prepared enough. I'd forgotten to bring the lead that goes between the box and the telly. So I went, okay, can we, have you got anything that can do this? And there were 3 generations of female living in that house, one of each generation. And the mum, the eldest, the grandmother, I'll call her, said, "Oh yeah, there's one up in this girl's room, the youngest's room, top of the house. Just go in, get it. She's not in, so don't worry." So up I pottered. As I literally got through the door jamb, through the door frame, it's kind of like a really heavy presence. It was almost like walking into jelly, invisible jelly, and it was like, what the heck is this? And there was this feeling, this internal voice that said, "Get out. You're not welcome here." That was the feeling that I got. "You're not welcome. Just get out." I was like, well, this is just stupid. I'm only going for a DVD lead. So I could see across the bedroom. Oh, there it is. Right. So I'm kind of trying to just get through to this DVD. I remember picking the box up and just going flick, flick like that, try and look around the back, and couldn't see the lead. So I turned around and went, I can't see the door because it was hidden away in a corner. So that's when I panicked, and I just kind of like ran, and I got down the stairs, and the mum said, the middle mum, the mother of the daughter said, "Did you feel anything in that room?" I'm like, no. No. I'm thinking, what the heck? So anyway, I went and spoke to the minister who had been there at the time. I spoke to him afterwards, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, the thing is, they've had the youngest daughter had been playing with Ouija in that room, and as a result, I've done a bit of a blessing on the place, but it's obvious that she's still using the stuff by the sound of what you've said." I've since sort of, looking back on it, if I'd have known what had happened in that room beforehand, I would have just said, "Oh yeah, well, I was psychologically primed. I was expecting to find something in there." But I'd literally just gone up for a DVD lead. So the fact that I felt that inner voice of, "Get out, you're not welcome." I'm like, okay, there's something to this. And the fact that it was corroborated by the mum, who actually afterwards said, "Yeah, we've seen shadow people on these stairs." And I'm thinking, okay, that's the second time at that point in 2 months that I'd heard the term shadow people. I'd never heard it before. I'm thinking, okay, something's going on here. Since then, I've been involved in ministry in a village near where I live now. And we've kind of had the occasional call to go and help people who have experienced strangeness in their house. And my own friendship base has a lot of neo-pagans. And one of the neo-pagan ladies said to me, "Look, I'm having problems. Something's happening. Can you come and help sort it out? Because I haven't got the power to do this." And I'm like, well, I don't have the power to do this, but I know somebody who does. His name's Jesus, and but I'm not a Bible basher like that. But you know what I mean. So we just went round, prayed around the house, felt some cold spots, and I messaged her the next day, and she said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And she said, "I've slept for the first time in months like a baby." And her husband and her family sort of like, they've only had one incident since then. And I've had other experiences like that. The worst was when we were going through some family stress with my eldest, and we ended up with an exercise book. He was sat downstairs in the lounge with us watching the telly. Our 2 youngest were upstairs on their computers playing Minecraft. And the smoke alarm went off. I'm thinking, okay, well, I've just bought a new soldering station. I must have left that switched on. I went into the kitchen. It was stone cold. My eldest went into the dining room, and there was a big fire on the table. His exercise book had self-combusted. that and the slow cooker that didn't like to cook chicken, the actual switches, the physical plug switch would switch off when we put a chicken in the slow cooker, and left it. And we were all out of the house. There was nobody able to get back in because they were all, bus journeys away from the house, the kids. Nobody else had a key to the house. And just weird things like that. You just think, well, okay. But when I first went into ministry, somebody said, you might get the occasional person who's really desperately in need of some money for some food knocking on the door. And there was a little fund that could help people out like that. I could go and take them to Tesco's and do some shopping for them and just claim the receipt. So within a few days, the doorbell would be ringing in the middle of the night and then in the daytime. And, I'm the scientist who says, well, maybe there's some water dripping into it. But then the doorbell's in a porch, so the water can't get to it. So, I'm like, okay, fine. These are weird things that happen. If somebody needs some help, I'm happy to just sort of say, well, okay, if you want some peace, I'll do a communion, help you out, sort of thing. You might not be in the flesh, but hey, I'm not going to nitpick on that one.
It is a melding. I mean, let's talk about your electronic background. We're not just talking to somebody who knows the scriptures. He's also incredibly scientific minded. You work in electronics, right?
No, I'm actually a supply teacher for physics. So my background, my degree is chemical and mineral engineering. But I've had electronics as a hobby since I was 9. So I'd be building things like bat detectors by the time I was 14. I've always been interested in picking up stuff that is not available to the ordinary senses. So, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. And I see some of the stuff like the spirit boxes, which are, for all intents and purposes, just a radio that can't, it's had its station lock circuitry disconnected. And then I look at things like pareidolia and how the human brain interprets patterns, because we are beings that are made for rational thought. And part of our evolution, as it were, is to spot danger. And so we're very, very, very good at pattern spotting. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, we will spot patterns where there's not necessarily anything there. For instance, in clouds. Mm-hmm. So when I look at things like the electronics that are used in today's sort of paranormal stuff, I just think to myself, yeah, I would expect some disturbance of electromagnetics to be present, especially if you're trying to manifest mass out of nothing. There's going to be some sort of energy change that's taking place there in poltergeist phenomena. But as to what's going on under the bonnet, I would say we don't know at this stage. We just seem to be able to use the scientific tools that we've got to say this is possibly energy grounding from a stressful situation, or things like astral travel and lucid dreaming and all that sort of stuff. Is this stuff that is happening where our spirit leaves the body and we can communicate in that way with each other, and we see things that we don't normally see when we're in the rational self, in the conscious state, which says, don't be stupid, you just didn't see that. But when it comes to the electronic side of things, I'm a little bit cautious as to how much emphasis is placed on using electronics to find evidence of the paranormal. I think there's too much subjectivity that goes on, and there's also too much commercialism that's gone on as well. People want to sell stuff, and people are being given pseudo-scientific explanations as to how it works. And because people aren't necessarily scientifically trained, they will look at that and go, wow, this torch, it'll switch on when I ask it a question. It'll turn off again. It'll turn on when I ask it another question. But that's just like a metallic expansion due to heat and that sort of stuff. So, I'm kind of more the ASAP side of things in that sense of testing everything. And actually, that's a biblical thing in itself. Test everything, hold on to what is true. So, test it. I am a skeptic in some of the claims, but I wouldn't say necessarily that that everything is just human, as it were.
Mm-hmm. There is another side to you that I wish to explore a little bit.
Oh no!
Not only do you have these other strings to your bow that we're talking about tonight, but you're also a mentalist, a stage mentalist.
Oh, dear me, you must be a mind reader. How'd you find that out?
Have a good look around your website, darling.
Oh, dear. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I have done stage mentalism. I used to be a member of Psychical, which is the British Society of Mystery Entertainers, and Nottingham Guild of Magicians as well. I had to kind of give it up when I went into ministry in 2015, 2014, simply because there was just too much going on at the time. But now I'm out of it. I want to kind of recapture that stuff.
Because that brings in so many interesting psychological aspects, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, for me, my journey into mentalism was because I was kind of this Darren Brown character. Is he really in cahoots with the devil, as some of these fundies say? Or is there another way of doing it? So, again, study to show myself approved of God. I just went and studied mentalist techniques using various books that you can find available in the public domain. But I'm just going to say Google is your friend on that one. And then I realised I got a book about Chung Ling Soo, who's the guy, I think he's the first guy to die from the bullet catch. But he was English guy, dressed up as a Chinese guy because it was all mystical at the time. Mm-hmm. But he also did a lot of investigations of mediumship, physical mediumship. And as a result of that, he was able to produce pretty much all of the stuff that they could do. And I think the SPR had a lot of that sort of types of character that were going in to explore what was going on in the physical mediumship realm, which is why I think physical mediumship is, especially now that we've got infrared cameras and photography, that's kind of died its death almost. Although I did see that they got an episode on it on, what's that, Netflix, Surviving Death.
Yeah, it's very generic. I found that series.
Yeah. So yeah, mentalism really is quite handy for spotting things like cold reading. Mm-hmm. You can. I've sat there alongside numerology, reading people and all that sort of stuff, and you're listening and you're just going, "Yep, that's a fork." They've forked, said one thing, and then backed up and gone down there to find a hit. So I wouldn't say I'm as closed-minded as Darren Brown is. But I do see a lot of it. I've seen it in the church. I was at a church in a big Pentecostal type church in the town that I used to live in, and went there for 9 months. And one of the meetings they had was how to prophesy. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's have a look at that. So Saturday morning I'm there, and the guy's there, and he's standing at the front facing us, and he's going, now I'm going to give you an example of how you can do this. There's somebody here who's got a pain in their left side. Silence. And I'm thinking, hey up. and then he said, oh, it must be because I'm looking at you, so therefore you're reversed, so it'll be on your right side. Bingo, 2 hands go up. And then he went off on one. And I'm thinking, you know what, you're just as bad as the people you say are using cold reading techniques in, say, a tarot reading or stuff like that. You're just as bad.
So he's talking to a tarot reader. She says.
I've got my little dirty secret is I've got 5 sets of tarot cards. There we go. I'm going public. I'm out of the broom closet.
Excellent. I do love people coming out on the show.
But I mean, I bought them. I bought a pack once at a Mind Body Spirit fair, and my wife picked it out and we went, what on earth have you bought these for? and then as we're driving back, she's kind of picking them out, and you've got the world, and you've got the lovers, and it's like, hold on a second, there's a heck of a lot of Christian imagery in this.
Oh yeah.
And I went, well, okay, I can't be the first person to have thought this. Let's have a look online, Google, Christians and Tarot, and up came a book, Beyond Spirituality, by a guy called John Drain, who'd written all about the Christianity and the Tarot. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow, okay. I won't use them for fortune telling because that's but they are very good with the archetypal stuff. Yeah. I mean, I used to do a lot of mind, body, spirit fairs as a church, parachurch team, so lots of different church people that were interested in this sort of stuff from different churches would get together. We wouldn't do Bible bashing, we'd just sort of like offer prayer and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'd got this thing called the Jesus deck, and I used to do Jesus deck readings with people. So, my minister at the time said, "Oh, it sounds a bit dodgy, let's have a go." He pulled the 3 cards out, and then he started doing the reading himself. I was like, okay. So he then went out with me in the marketplace. And he sat down and he said, after 3 hours, he'd had 6 readings with people, each about half an hour long. And he said, "Matt, you just twisted my head with this. How can God use a pack of cards to have a conversation with someone about God that I've never met? Mm-hmm. And it's deeper than some of the conversations I've had with my church members." As I say, God's fingerprints are everywhere. So, if you seek, you find.
Very true. Very true indeed. Well, you redeemed yourself there, is all I'm saying.
That's fine. I, as I say, I've been down in the woods with practicing witches at various sabbats as the church guy, as the Christian. Mm. So, and I've spoken at Pagan Pride UK for five years. And Nottingham's Imperium Society.
Oh, you must know my lovely Ashley Mortimer then.
Ash? Oh, yes, I know Ash very well. Brilliant bloke.
He's one of my friends. I like him a lot. And Cal Cooper. And Cal Cooper.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of mutual friends, Matt.
Yeah. It's a small world.
It is really, isn't it? So how do we go forward this? When I speak to my local church, I tried to get one of the local reverends on, and he just wouldn't come on to discuss faith in the community and the importance of that. And that's the road I wanted to go down on that show. And they just wouldn't discuss it. I think he was scared I would go down the exorcism route and stuff like that, which, I wouldn't have out of respect unless he was prepared to. And yet we meet someone like you who's very open-minded and sees relevance of paranormal phenomena occurring in the Bible, trying to make sense of that, bringing it forward. Why have we got such a division within the church?
I think a lot of it is to do with how we've approached the paranormal throughout the last 2,000 years, really. Starting with Augustine, going onwards, you've seen, and through to Luther, you've seen this winnowing away of this middle ground between the physical plane and the sort of the top plane of God's domain. Missiologist called Paul Hibert wrote a paper called The Flaw of the Excluded Middle, where he went out into various tribal cultures in the Far East and discovered that they had got not just an eternal being, but they got this realm of everyday creatures in the spirit realm that would be used for various things, and then in the bottom realm was this realm of science, as it were, hard science. And in the West, we've kind of removed this middle ground, and we've kind of rationalized it away. The church itself is pretty guilty of rationalizing a lot of the stuff. There's theologians like Bultmann in the 20th century kind of demythologized the Bible so much that we still inherit this, oh, well, these miracles couldn't have really happened. Oh, this walking on water couldn't have happened. This raising from the dead couldn't have happened. All this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, what have you got left? part of my dissertation looked at the increasing interest in the paranormal over the last century, through to this one. And at times of great crisis, where you've got World War I and World War II, they've got massive loss of life, where people have died in battlefields, loved ones haven't been able to say goodbye properly in the normal grieving process and letting go. And as a result, you saw the spiritualist movement rapidly increase. About 1939, there was a spiritualism report that was done by a small sort of group of people from the Church of England that was presented, and at the time it was kind of, we've got more important things to do, sort of thing, and so it was kind of put aside. Now, people have got this conspiracy theory that, they didn't really like the findings of it, and so therefore they buried it. That's not strictly true. The thing is just that it's the Church of England and it has its red tape, and stuff gets put aside and not released for so long anyway. But a guy called Michael Perry, who's one of my predecessors as editor of the Christian Parapsychologist Journal, he managed to get hold of this report, and he's produced it. And you can actually see that some of that report says some of these claims that are done by these particular groups, we need to explore further. Now, when I read it as the major report and the minority report, the major report says, we can go in this completely open-minded. The minority report says, we can be open-minded, but don't have our brains drop out. Some of this has got some chicanery going on. And then you get to things like the Michael Taylor incident in early 1970s, where that exorcism that took place that went very badly wrong. They didn't finish the job off. Allegedly, they left stuff in this guy who then went and ripped the face off his wife, and it all went horribly, horribly wrong. He murdered her. And that caused the Church of England to go, hold on a second, we really need to sort this whole exorcism situation out. And so they kind of put in some really good safeguards that have been since then updated. And I think actually they're very good safeguards that make sure that if you do have this sort of thing, it's got to be done properly, and you get medical practitioners in as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not just spiritual. There's an assessment of the psychological makeup of the person and all of that. So I think rather than just leave it for anybody to say, you've got a demon in you, you need exercising, which some of the churches still do, and can cause a lot of damage to people as a result. The Church of England itself is quite guarded in that respect, and it's very rare that an exorcism will take place. So I think really it's always been there, it's been buried, but I think with the increase in paranormal in the popular culture, I think it's going to miss a trick if it kind of just sits on its backside and does nothing about it. Hence, there are things like the Church's Fellowship for Psychical Spiritual Studies, which were formed just after 1939. It's coming up to its 70th anniversary now. And they were created to say, actually, we want to seriously look at this stuff rather than and take a Christian perspective of it, but have that Bible-based stuff, but have that science-based stuff as well, so that we can look at this rather than brush it under the carpet, like some people sadly try and do.
It's incredibly, the safeguard measures, like you've just said, are incredibly important, and even more so in recent times. Mental health of people seems to have declined before, and this was going on before COVID struck. Really, there has been a decline in general mental well-being. Is that, do you feel, down to an erosion of faith in these theologies, or do you think that's just the pressures of modern society?
I think it's kind of both. I think knowing who you are and whose you are, your Christ-centered self-definition, can help you go through these times of what I call the desert experience, where there's very little to do. In the Christian mystics always talk about this formational desert time where things are just winnowed away and you just focus down on the basics. And if you don't know who you are and whose you are, then you can get all discombobulated as to, well, what's the point of being here? Then you can also get things like, well, I'm locked up in my house all day. I'm not able to see anybody. I usually go to work. I'm starting to hear creaks and bangs and knocks in my house. I must be haunted. And actually, there's just a lot of everyday thermal expansion going on in a house as the sun comes up and warms your bricks and your timbers of your house. But if you go online, you'll get people who are taking more photos in the house than they've ever done before. We've got dusty houses, guys. I hate to break it to you. Unless your house is like a factory for producing computer hard drives where it's a complete air filtration system, you're going to have dust because you're going to have flaky skin that's going to drop off. And when you're putting up photos online and saying, is this an orb? Sadly, you'll get some people who will go, yeah, you've got a spirit there. Here's a photo. What do you see in this photo? And people will turn around and go, oh, I see something very dark. And I've actually kind of got really quite narky with people that say that they see something dark just from a photo, because you're actually sowing some really quite dangerous stuff into somebody's head if they feel that they've got a demonic presence in there. That can set off all sorts of psychosis problems. So, I would just say, get to know your house better, and just accept the creaks and bangs for what they are, just creaks and bangs.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely something. Paul?
Yeah, no, I'll just agree. I think now more people are obviously staying indoors. As you said, they're noticing more and more what they would class as activity because they've watched these ghost programs on the TV.
Yep.
And there seems to be more and more popping up every day, all doing the same sort of stuff. And
yeah, it's getting a bit boring, to be honest. Come on, we need a different format. I had to watch hundreds of hours of these programs, purely for research purposes, of course.
Of course you did. It's the most haunted phenomena. They created a monster in the paranormal field, most haunted. So on one hand it was good, but on the other hand, not quite so good, because we still follow that format, don't we, in the field?
Yeah. And for me now, I prefer the talking heads, the storytelling, things like haunted hospitals and that. You'll look at it and you've got to realise that the dramatisations are what they are, dramatisations. But the stories are still really interesting. So, there's all sorts of things where you look and I picked out a few that I have for my little Facebook group, and I'll throw up a video and we'll talk through it and what is going on here. And I'll pick out one or two that are particularly where you're going, this cannot be a demon in a modern day sense of the word. Because actually, what are the fruit of it? The fruit are actually somebody's healed, somebody's been saved from a bad accident, somebody has been able to find something that they weren't able to find and live a better life as a result of it. So therefore, I like those kind of programs rather than the running around with a shaky camera. Because I'm just going, actually, guys, how many hundreds of thousands of budget have you got? You could buy so many cameras, have 3 locked-off cameras in one room. And, you've got the ability to do infrasound readings now. You could do in-pressure readings outside the building and in, so you can see whether the doors are opening or not because of wind. There's so much you could do, but that would be really boring, wouldn't it? You wouldn't be screaming your head off.
Yeah, you wouldn't be riveted to the screen watching somebody run out of a room.
They would still be accused of faking evidence as well, because with it being on the telly, you've got the added addition of being able to edit.
Yes.
And when you have like 4 or 5 cameras, you don't know. You're taking their word for it that they're all in sync, and it's live.
There's that. Yeah, and you've also got these ones that say that they're live, but they're not. And then you've got things like Mary Loves Dick, which is
my favourite episode.
In a live reading, a live broadcast. So, and how much did he get? Was it 20 quid he got for saying that? You can find the YouTube video on it.
Yeah, it's
I actually remember watching that episode.
I think we all watched it with our mouths wide open, going, "I can't believe he's saying that." And anyway, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
There is a very famous, I say very famous because I'd not heard of it until I looked at your website. Poltergeist case that you personally have done quite a lot of research on, a very, very thorough research, I would say, even going back to the original letters that this particular case entailed, which was the Epworth poltergeist, which involved a Christian family, didn't it?
Yes, so the very famous Wesley family for the Methodists. This is at the beginning of lockdown where I'm thinking, what the heck do I do? I'm being furloughed as a teacher, as a supply teacher, so I literally had nothing to do. And I thought I need to do something productive, and hence I produced the website. And one of the stories that I got when I went to visit Epworth Rectory about 8-9 years ago with my wife, I picked up a little booklet called The Epworth Poltergeist that was the account by Samuel Wesley. And it was just a side on my bookcase, and I just picked it out one day and I looked at it and went, actually, I could do something on this. So I used all of the research strategies that I'd done when I'd been doing my dissertation and my master's, and I applied them to the Epworth Poltergeist. So I was literally going back to the source materials, finding the earliest stuff that I could, analysing when dates were, when things were happening. I tried to put it in a chronological order.
Oh, sorry, to apologise.
Okay.
My dog's decided to discuss things. Lay down. We don't need your input, thank you. Lay down. Okay, I think we're safe.
You okay? Not to worry.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah. So I went through all of the original letters, when they were dated, who they were from and to, and tried to put them in a chronological order of the events, which I don't think anybody's actually done before. They've basically relied heavily on Samuel Wesley's report, which was 70 years later. So I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of embellishment, and when you look at this stuff, there is a lot of embellishment that he's added to this stuff, a lot of bravado when he confronts the poltergeist. That's not in the original letters. Now, that's not to say it didn't happen, but we just can't say that happened originally. And so I just went and produced a series looking through the actual floor plans. You see, this is where Most Haunted came in really handy, because floor plans feature heavily in a lot of ghost programs nowadays.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's have a look at this. And also, to be fair, that Osborne World of the Strange Ghosts book also has some floor plans that show people walking through where the new wall's been put in. And so I thought, well, let's look at the floor plans. Now, it's lockdown. Epworth Rectory's closed. I can't go in there and take photos or anything like that. So I had to do a bit more scouting around on the internet, and I found an English Heritage had done a wood core samples tree ring analysis on the timbers, and they'd produced a floor plan of the place. So I was able to use that, and then by reading through the letters carefully, you can actually see the flow of the people as they move around the building at various times when certain incidents happen. And you can also say, well, actually, it's pretty sure that there's a door that should have been here. It looks like in this modern day thing, it's been blocked up. And so you can actually then work out, well, what was going on? Where were the people when these incidents were happening? And you look at it and think, maybe there was something happening, and maybe there was some of the kids were playing around with stuff. And maybe, I mean, this is my own pet theory, there might have been a little bit of an illicit love affair going on between one of the daughters and the best man, as it were, of the father, the butler, as it were. I mean, it could be, it might not be, but, I kind of put a hypothesis out there and test the evidence against it.
And that is exactly how you should research a case. Go back to the alpha source, which is the original letters that you're able to get your hands on, and actually look at the alpha source and break it down and do the work. If you've got a case, do the work. You know, if you're looking at any form of case, you have to go back to the alpha source as far back as you can to that point and do the work, do the research. Have you got any tips for people in the modern ghost hunting world that might give them a better insight into their investigations?
Know your equipment, know the limitations of it, know the history of the place as best as you can. Don't think you know everything. Do try and build a network of people who are specialists in their field that you can call on to analyse various bits of data. Go in expecting nothing to happen, and if something does, well, okay. Don't stir stuff up because you don't know what you're messing around with. Nobody does. And test everything. Be aware of your own psychological makeup as well, what your blind sides are. Have somebody there who will be a total skeptic, who will ask you those difficult questions that you might go, actually, we'd not thought of that. We need to address that problem in the data. That's kind of how I would go through with that sort of stuff. And, you know, don't be afraid to ask a spiritual person, even somebody, if you need something that is causing an issue to someone, you can go to a local vicar, and that vicar might be able to point you on if the case needs to go a bit further. Or they might be able to come and just say a prayer with the person. Never say to anybody that this is definitely haunted, because you can't say 100% for sure that it is. There might be information that you don't know about. And try and bring peace to a place rather than just go in for evidence. Because if you're just going in to try and find evidence of the afterlife, you might hurt somebody in the process.
Very well said. Now, several times throughout this interview, you've talked about know who you are and whose you are, teachings from the Christian belief system. How or what advice would you give somebody to reach that point within themselves?
I'm coming from the Christian tradition, so things like meditation would help you to know who you are. It would help you to be able to shut down certain bits of you, that, especially the ego, and try and listen to that voice that comes from within. For me, that would be the voice of God speaking, because God lives within each of us. I'm using Christian terminology, but we've got all our own words for this. Mm-hmm. But also know who you are, whose you are, because you are a child of the eternal God, who loves and cares for you, and isn't a killjoy. Okay, so expect you to have fullness of life, and so therefore some things might be off limits because they can actually be either physically, mentally, emotionally, or whatever, damaging to us further down the line. We can get trapped in certain ways of thinking that are harmful to ourselves. So anything that really is not giving you life in all its fullness isn't what God's plan is for us. So therefore, just be aware and listen. I mean, even today, just 10 minutes, just light a candle and just be silent. The power of silence has spoken to everybody. God's speaking, and we're just so busy with our lives, we just can't hear that. And, that protection that we get when we are going to areas that are disturbed, I would say. I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but just where there's something happening, for me, I would not go in there without some sort of form of prayer.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that would be in regards to internal examination as well as external, because there are parts of your brain that are disturbed that you would need to go and examine that, but you still need to do that with protections in place, your own personal protections and boundaries. And, you know, that's just as relevant as well as externally disturbed places. That's just something I would advise anybody.
Definitely. We are more than just our conscious selves, and our unconscious can be quite a weird, if not quite disturbing place.
Mm-hmm. Paul,
yeah,
I'm bringing you in at this point. How are you feeling now about the Christian belief system in regards to the paranormal?
I mean, I've got my own faith, and I believe certain aspects. I mean, I don't believe all of everything that went on in the Bible, but then I don't. I mean, like you, I sort of question everything. Yeah, I don't know. I just have my own belief, and it doesn't always tally up with what other Christians believe. It's just my personal opinion.
I don't believe everything that a lot of other Christians believe either. So we're in the same boat there.
It's like when it comes to like ghosts and, you know, looking at paranormal investigations and stuff that I've done, I never, like you said, I've never said, oh, this place is haunted. It's more of a case of there's something going on here I can't explain.
Yeah.
And just because I can't explain it doesn't mean to say that Joe Bloggs 5 years down the line can't. He'll come out with another explanation. So it stumped me for the moment, you know, and that's it. I mean, I can't. There have been things I can't explain, like for example that mobile phone experiment that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
You know, that was totally blown my mind, and I can't figure out what that was. Yeah, it was just really weird, because what we done, we had a mobile phone and we phoned up someone else's phone on the investigation and put their phone in an empty room. What we got back on the other phone was basically someone watching the telly in that room. We actually worked out that the film they were watching was Night of the Demon.
Okay.
And as we was talking to, it was like saying, hello, what's your name? Are you there, sort of thing. It would actually give us answers as well. We asked it to turn the telly down. It turned the telly down. But the telly was as clear as day.
Mm-hmm. And so what Paul did was he actually tracked back the time of the investigation as to what was streaming on all the relevant TV programs at the time to see if there was interference, and that particular film had it been on the TV at the time. No, it wasn't.
The investigation took place the end of last year, not last year, 2018, I think, and the movie was last played on terrestrial TV 2010.
And there was no way of connecting up any...
No, I even contacted the phone company of my phone company and asked their tech guys, you know, is there any way that it could be interfered with? And they're like, without substantial equipment, no.
But
the world is stranger than we think.
It is very strange, but we haven't closed the door on that and said that's paranormal. We've left that door open, and you know, as we come across various people and new technology and stuff like that, we're looking and still seeing if we can explain that. You know, and that's actually the whole lesson of today's show is, regardless of your belief system, be aware of that belief system, but be aware within that. You have to remain open-minded and constantly examine it, like Matt does with the Christianity belief he's got. He's looking at those scriptures and taking those and trying to understand those and bring some form of sense to it in a modern perspective. which brings lessons within itself, and applying it to other areas and bringing those areas into his paranormal experience in his own right? Isn't that what we do? We bring lots of different threads in. It's called the chimera of the paranormal. I've written a blog on this recently. I love that word.
It's a great word.
It is a great word. Wow. So what's next for you, Matt? This website is absolutely phenomenal. I'm loving what you're putting up there. What's next for you?
Oh, how long's this lockdown?
I know, right?
I mean, to be honest, next for me is go for have a pint with my friends at the pub.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm focusing on at the moment. So I've got some more material that I've got to write up from research. So that's going to kind of be more to do with things like demon and legion actually not being non-human beings, but actually human beings, human spirits within the Gadarene demoniac. So I've got a lot of stuff that was to do with my dissertation still to put up there. But then there's things like networking with more people. As I said before, I'm the editor of the Christian Parapsychologist Journal, so I kind of am involved in that more. There's conferences that I'm speaking at, organising the Midlands Deliverance Forum, that sort of stuff. So when lockdown finally finishes, I might actually go out and just listen and see what's out there. I mean, this is part of my role, really, is just listening to what's out there in the popular culture, but also listening to where's God moving in people's lives, even though they might not call him God. But also where are things happening that need a gentle touch to bring some healing and wholeness. That's my ambition, really, is to just bring in healing and wholeness to people and to places that are disturbed.
Oh, that's really lovely, actually. That's really lovely. I love that.
Thank you.
Tell everybody where they can find your work, Matt.
So my God, Ghouls and Ghosts... Ghouls... I can't remember.
What's your website, love?
Yes, 3G. ghostschoolsandgod.co.uk is my paranormal side of things. I have another one which is writings that I do with a lot of the pagan side of things, which is godofgreenhope.com. And we have a Facebook group for Ghost Schools and God as well, and a page. And that's where I am, really.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today and discussing many various aspects of the paranormal, not just the Bible perspective. I'm sure at some point you're going to join us back on the show to do, to probably delve into a more specific area, because when we delve into these sort of things, we recognise our weaknesses, don't we, Paul?
Absolutely, yeah. We can't know everything, can we?
No.
Nobody can. Nobody can know everything.
No, and when you look at the Bible and the paranormal phenomena, you soon understand it's so immense that there's so much. And many, many times on many topics, we come back to these kind of phenomena that have occurred and have been recorded and written down for ancient years. And it's a lifetime study, just one particular area, as Matt can verify. It's not a 5-minute job. It's not a 5-minute internet search. This is a lifetime study in one specific area. And the paranormal is filled with so many different areas. And it crosses over into so many different other areas as well. It's just, that side of it never ceases to amaze me. It's important to remember human factor in all of this, and our inherent ability to categorise and put things in boxes, yet remain open-minded and never, ever think you're an expert on the subject. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Matt.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're going to end the show on that. So say good night, Paul.
Good night.
Good night.